Mr. Goldsmith, thank you so much for making time to speak to us, and welcome to the Office of the Indian Weekender. How would you describe the law and order situation under the Labour government over the last few years?
Oh, look, we've seen a real breakdown of law and order in New Zealand. We had a government that was really focused on reducing the prison population by 30%, irrespective of what was going on in the community. And I think most New Zealanders would agree with reducing the prison population if there was a reduction in crime. But not so much if there is an increase in violent crime and also retail crime. And so they were muddle-headed, sent all the wrong messages, and we've seen a growth in crime that we need to get on top of.
The crime rate has gone up and the convictions have gone down.
Yep.
What's happening?
Well, because we've had a soft on crime approach where they have really had excuses for crime everywhere. And the focus has been on the needs of the people who are committing the crimes and explaining away what they've done rather than focusing on the needs of the victims of crime. And of course, the best thing we can do is to make sure that they're not victims at all by having a safe environment where people can go about their business and not feel like they're going to be robbed all the time, and also to feel safe in our communities.
Now, quite often victims of ram raids and thefts, they complain that they are treated less of victims and the offender is treated more as a victim of circumstances. What do you have to say to those people?
Well, help is on the way. We are focused, the National Party is very much focused on restoring law and order and having real consequences for crime. And that is very important to us because the most important thing that a government can do is ensure that people feel safe and that they feel that their work is rewarded when you're working hard to build a business and to look after your own family, that you should be supported by a government and not those who seek to take it from you.
Now, the Labour government has announced a new set of measures that they plan to implement to control crime. Of course, it comes pretty close to the election. How would you rate those measures? Are they enough, and what are they lacking?
Well, their heart is not really in it. They're only doing it for the politics of it. They know that they are in trouble on law and order, and so they're trying to look like they're doing something. Some of the tools that they're giving to police will be helpful, but it doesn't overwhelm the primary message, which is we want to have fewer people in prison. We're going to have excuses for crime. We're going to send very mixed messages to the gangs around, giving money to Harry Tam and all those. And so it's that mixed message that the government continues to send, which is the problem.
And Labour is picking forward a nationalist plan to send, or rather to enforce a more, rather stricter policy on sending people to prison. They say a lot of taxpayer money would be spent to maintain that additional infrastructure and prison population. What do you have to say to that?
The prison population under Labour has reduced by about 20%, and yet the cost has gone up. And so they haven't had any savings because they're so bad at organising everything. Most of the cost of prisons are a fixed cost, regardless of how many people are in there. And so we think there's plenty of capacity. And of course, our goal is not necessarily to have everybody in prison. Our goal is to reduce the amount of crime in our community, and that's about sending a clear message and having real consequences. And that's what we're focused on.
And how would you rate delivery of justice under the Labour government?
There are a number of issues. Obviously, like I say, they've been soft on that violent crime and youth crime and retail crime. The other big challenge in the justice sector is to speed up the process of the courts, because there are many people's lives being on hold for years waiting for justice. And so that needs to be a real focus of the next national government, to speed up the process so people can get on with their lives quickly.
So should social circumstances of offenders really matter even a little bit when it comes to considering those cases?
The background of an offender has always been considered, but it should never be an excuse. I mean, ultimately, if you are the victim of a stabbing, for example, it doesn't matter to you whether the person who did it was 13 or 30 or 60, come from a rich background or a poor background, doesn't matter at all. You've still got a knife in you. And so that's the only thing that matters. And so when you're looking at it from the point of victims, it's having consequences for that crime and having a clear message from the community that the community doesn't tolerate those acts. That's the message that's important.
Now, National has proposed having boot camps. There was a similar idea earlier under an earlier national government, and the critics often point out that the reoffending rate didn't really come down. How is it going to be any different this time?
Well, we've learned from previous attempts, and this one is going to be based or focused on a volunteer service that's worked well with the Defence Forces, and it's going to be longer, up to 12 months. And at the end of the process, it's not that you just get sent home, that you continue to be supported and looked after by community groups. So it's part of a much broader package that's about providing the judges with another option. At the moment, there's a spectrum for young offenders of a pat on the head and we'll see you again next weekend, through to supervision, through to ankle bracelets, through to being locked up in a juvenile facility. And what we're doing, two things. We're going to create a new category of young serious offenders, which will move them up those categories if they're repeat serious offenders. And secondly, we provide one more option, which is the military academies. And so it's about having more options for the judges and also more ability to help those very small group of repeat serious offenders back on track.
If you were to come in power, what would be the top changes in justice and law and order that we can expect in the first 100 days?
Well, first we change our overarching priority not to reduce the population of the prison regardless of what's going on. Our focus and our priority is to reduce the number of victims of crime. That sends a completely different message to the whole justice sector. Then we give the police the tools that they need to deal with the gangs. Thirdly, we restrict the ability of judges to massively reduce sentences so that there are real consequences for crime. And we also provide those tools to deal with young offenders, the young serious offender category and the boot camps. And then the final thing we do is speed up the processes of the courts and have a real focus on that so people get their lives back on track sooner.
And moving on to your personal campaign, how is it coming along?
It's very good. I'm based in the Epsom electorate, which includes Remuera and Parnell, Green Lane, parts of Mount Eden. It's the Auckland Grammar Zone and the Epsom Girls Grammar Zone, effectively. And we're working hard there. And we have a very simple message this time. In the past, there have been arrangements with the ACT Party. This time, we're just going for 2 ticks for National. I'm standing as the candidate at Paul Goldsmith for Epsom. But the party vote is the critical one that we're really searching for.
One last question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate National's chances of winning the election?
I would say 8 out of 10. We feel confident. I think there is a very strong mood for change in New Zealand, but we've actually got to seal the deal. And there is a lot of complacency out there. A lot of people assume that National is going to win, and we're making it very clear that if you want change, you've got to choose that change and you've got to vote for that change. And there are a lot of different parties saying, vote for me and we'll help National. We say, if you really want to change, the only way you can guarantee that change is to give your party vote to National.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank you very much.